Every year in the United States, police officers discharge their weapons at civilians over 1,000 times. Many of those bullets are fired in the chaos of confusion, fear, and reaction, not always in pursuit of justice. 1 in every 8 of those shootings ends a life. Behind those numbers are names, faces, dreams. One of those names is Amir Locke, and his story begins in the stillness of an early February morning, but ends in national unrest, legal controversy, and a single haunting question. Why did Amir Locke have to die? Tonight, we peel back the layers of this chilling case. We examine the raid, the bullet, the badge, and everything that fell apart in between. This is CrimeBot Chronicles. Subscribe now, because what you're about to hear will stay with you. Let's begin.
It was just before dawn on February 2nd, 2022. In Minneapolis, the city was blanketed in snow. Sub-zero temperatures coated the windows of the Bolero Flats apartment complex downtown. Inside Unit 701, Amir Locke, a 22-year-old black man with a clean record and a legal firearm, was curled up under a thick blanket on a living room couch. He had been staying at his cousin's apartment. Amir wasn't a suspect. He wasn't even named in the warrant. Yet in less than 60 seconds, a SWAT team would kick in the door, scream overlapping commands, and fire 3 fatal shots. But let's not begin with the bullet. Let's begin with the man. Amir Locke was described by his mother as a gentle soul, a talented musician. He was a licensed gun owner, trained in safe handling. His plan was to move to Dallas, where he hoped to launch his music career. He was a son, a brother, a dreamer. By all accounts, he was careful, respectful. He didn't drink. He didn't party. He believed in doing things the right way. But even the right way, as we'll discover, isn't always enough when chaos comes unannounced. At 6:48 a.m., a Minneapolis SWAT team entered the apartment using a key. It was a no-knock raid. They were executing a warrant related to a homicide in nearby St. Paul. The actual suspect? Amir's cousin. But police didn't know who would be inside the apartment that morning. And they didn't care. As soon as the door swung open, chaos began. Flashlights, shouts, a crashing footstep. Amir Locke, still under his blanket, was jolted awake. As his instincts kicked in, he reached for his gun, licensed, legal, within his rights, and tried to sit up. His finger was off the trigger. His muzzle pointed downward. Bodycam footage showed the moment. 9 seconds. That's all it took. Officer Mark Hanneman, seeing the glint of a weapon, yelled, "Hands," and opened fire. Amir crumpled to the floor. His final breath would come moments later. Let that sink in. In 9 seconds, a man asleep on a couch became a threat. A name, a hashtag, a headline. But how did we get here? What led to this raid? In late January 2022, police in St. Paul were investigating the shooting death of Otis Elder, a 38-year-old man killed during a suspected drug transaction. Surveillance footage identified a suspect, 17-year-old Makey Speed. Makey was Amir Locke's cousin. St. Paul detectives sought a standard knock-and-announce warrant. But when it came time to execute it, Minneapolis insisted on no-knock authorization, citing potential danger and risk of the suspect fleeing. The request was granted, but was it necessary? According to internal emails later reviewed in court filings, even St. Paul investigators were uneasy. The suspect was young, known, not a high-level threat. The building had surveillance. Why go in aggressively? These questions would haunt the city after Amir's death. Let's look at the psychology of no-knock raids. No-knock entries are meant to protect officers and preserve evidence, but in reality they create instant chaos, especially for civilians unaware of what's happening. Studies show that startled individuals, especially gun owners, often reach for protection instinctively. It's not aggression. It's confusion. It's fear. St. Paul detectives sought a standard knock-and-announce warrant. In Amir's case, it was sleep fog and primal instinct. His reaction took place in less than 2 seconds. But officers don't always have time to consider intent. They're trained to neutralize threats. Under stress, perception narrows. Officers experience tachypsychia, a form of time distortion where events seem slower or faster than they are. A flash of metal becomes a threat. A movement becomes an attack. In law enforcement training, this is the reasonable officer standard. It doesn't require certainty. It only requires perceived danger. This is the framework prosecutors use to justify the shooting. On April 6, 2022, Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison and Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman jointly announced that Officer Hanneman would not face criminal charges. They stated they could not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that his use of deadly force was unjustified under state law. The public reaction? Furious. Minneapolis had already been the epicenter of global outrage just 2 years prior, when George Floyd was murdered by police in the very same city. Tensions were still high. Community trust in law enforcement was fragile. Amir Locke's shooting shattered that trust further. Protests erupted within hours. Demonstrators marched through snow-lined streets, chanting Amir's name. Candlelight vigils were held. Muralists painted his face on brick walls next to George Floyd's. The mayor, Jacob Frey, issued a temporary moratorium on no-knock warrants within 2 days. It was later made permanent. The city of Minneapolis changed policy, requiring officers to knock and announce themselves and wait at least 20 seconds before entering during the day, 30 seconds at night. But for Amir's family, policy wasn't enough. They wanted justice, accountability, an explanation. His parents, Amir Locke and Karen Wells, lawyered up. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump, known for representing families of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, took on the case. Alongside him stood Antonio Romanucci and Jeff Storms. Together, they filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the city and Officer Hanneman in February 2023. By July 2024, U.S. District Judge Eric Tostrud ruled that the case could proceed. The court acknowledged plausible allegations of unconstitutional policy and inadequate supervision. The city tried to block the suit. The federal judge said no. Inside courtrooms, the debate centered on Monell liability, a legal doctrine that holds municipalities accountable for constitutional violations resulting from official policies or customs. Emails revealed that Minneapolis insisted on no-knock tactics, despite objections from the St. Paul team. That detail could make or break the case. Meanwhile, the man who pulled the trigger, Officer Hanneman, returned to active duty just weeks after the shooting. He had 3 previous complaints in his personnel file, none of which resulted in disciplinary action. Activists argued that reinstating him without mandatory retraining was proof of systemic failure. And then there's the broader picture. According to the Cato Institute, the U.S. sees about 20,000 no-knock raids annually. They're most common in drug cases, but data shows they often produce minimal results. In Minneapolis, only 8% of no-knock entries from 2010 to 2022 yielded felony contraband. High risk, low return. So why use them? Police argue that knock and announce entries allow suspects to destroy evidence or flee. But in too many cases, the result has been bloodshed, not arrests. Just ask the families of Breonna Taylor, Kenneth Chamberlain, or Duncan Lemp, each killed during no-knock raids. In Breonna's case, Louisville, Kentucky, settled for $12 million. In Houston, a botched raid in 2019 led to a $5.3 million payout. Cities often settle to avoid the glare of prolonged litigation but rarely admit fault. For Amir's family, the pain goes beyond dollars. He was their only son, their musician, their protector. He had dreams of owning a recording studio, helping kids escape the streets through music. He believed in gun safety, in law, in doing things right. And yet in 9 seconds, he was labeled a threat and eliminated. Let's talk about those 9 seconds. The bodycam footage shows it all. A key unlocks the door. Officers surge in. Amir stirs, reaches, and gets shot. There are no shouts of negotiation. No conversation. Just commands. Confusion. Then shots. Audio experts dissected the footage and found 6 distinct voices yelling overlapping instructions. One officer shouts, "Hands," while another yells, "Get on the ground." A third shouts, "Don't move," all within a 2-second span. This auditory chaos can overload the brain. Civilian psychologists explain that in high-stress moments, our brains struggle to process multiple conflicting commands. Reaction time slows. Comprehension fails. In essence, Amir never had a chance. Even if he had dropped the gun immediately, the shouting may have delayed his response long enough to seem non-compliant. And Officer Hanneman, under pressure, fearing for his life, chose to fire. So here lies the core of the tragedy. A frightened officer facing a frightened man. Both reacting. Both trying to survive. Only one walked away. As the city continues to grapple with its trauma, the Locke family persists in their fight. Karen Wells, Amir's mother, has become a vocal advocate for police reform. She speaks at conferences, leads vigils, tells her son's story again and again, hoping to prevent the next Amir from dying in his sleep. In Congress, the Justice and Clear Commands Act legislation to limit no-knock warrants remains stalled. But Amir's story gives it new urgency. National civil rights groups have cited his case in lobbying for federal reform. In Minneapolis, a VR simulation training program has been introduced, designed to help officers better distinguish threat levels. The technology is promising, but critics call it a band-aid for a deeper wound. The real question is this: can trust be rebuilt? Trust in the badge, in the courts, in the system that claims to protect us. For many in Minneapolis, that trust is gone, or at least badly cracked. And yet, through the cracks, Amir's legacy grows. Rappers sample his voice. Artists paint his smile. Students write essays in his name. His parents have created a foundation to support families impacted by police violence. He is not forgotten. He will not be. And as we close this episode of CrimeBot Chronicles, I leave you with one final image. A young man, head bowed, guitar in hand, strumming out lyrics under a dim apartment light. A dreamer. A creator. Someone who wanted to move the world with music, not become a symbol in its war over justice. That was Amir Locke. And that is what happened. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, if it made you think, please take a moment to like, comment, and share. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. This has been CrimeBot Chronicles, where truth gets a voice and every story gets told. Stay safe, stay awake, and above all, stay human.